that I did a presentation on decarbonisation at a members event. But this presentation is more varied and will focus on our environmental responsibilities and initiatives. And in summary, we'll take a summary view of through our new homes, our existing homes, and our operational activities. So just to start back at the beginning, still lots of buzzwords around within the sector: environmental sustainability, decarbonisation, carbon neutral, and I could go on. And environmental awareness does mean different things depending on the audiences. So if I take it back on the top left there, you can see an icon of the Conference of Parties, which is an annual meeting held by various countries. And the outcome of those meetings are normally lots of noises about we should be doing more to protect the environment. And we are in interesting times, and it will be interesting to see how these things play out on the global stage. For example, the influence of the re-elected American president and what that will impact that will have on global awareness. But within the sector, we also have government guidelines and regulations and vast amounts of regulations, from the building regulations to reducing our carbon footprints, which us as a social housing landlord have to abide by. But it's not just about regulations. In real terms, the way I like to look at it is about the impact on the environment, which we often lose sight of. But yet we get reminders. We have global weather incidents on the news, which are a sad reminder in terms of the impact and the damage that can be done by not looking after our environment. And for those that are not environmental enthusiasts and more real, which I know impacts on a lot of our residents, it's more simply about helping to reduce energy bills, which we know continue to increase.
At the table, can you sit up, please? If you finish.
Okay, so our corporate strategy, believe it or not, our 4-year corporate strategy will end next year, and I just don't believe where the time goes. So this slide here, I'm not expecting you, it's in small print, but it's snippets from our environmental responsibilities and objectives. And in summary, there is a big focus on improving our carbon footprint through decarbonisation of our homes. This includes building new homes, our business activities, supporting the reduction of energy costs for our residents, advice, support and training staff and residents on the environmental impact of our activities and how we can help to reduce it. And this is supported by our environmental framework, which is headed up by our sustainability policy. So that's like the umbrella policy. And then it's broken down into 2 further plans, one for new build homes, one for existing homes, and then one more operational plan for the business. And that relates to the use of energy through our offices, vehicle mileage, and procurement activities, to name but a few. Okay, so looking at our new homes, our development team have been focusing on 2 key strands of carbon reduction. The first being operational, and that's about building our homes to some of the highest energy efficient standards, which helps with lowering bills and tackling fuel poverty. It looks at the new regulations that come through, the new standards of building regulations, and builds homes from scratch to some of those highest standards, and looking at all of the different initiatives, the new technologies that we can include within our homes to get that sign off at a high standard. So, for example, moving from gas boilers to air source heat pumps, which is the more efficient and a more environmentally friendly heating and hot water system. The embodied carbon is the second element, and that's an interesting strand. I mean, my development colleagues on this call looking at this in a great level of detail, but embodied carbon looks at actually the materials that are used within our buildings and actually the carbon life of that material. So the production, the carbon usage of that material in production to the build and what impact that has on the development. So I think we've moved away now and completed our last brick and block construction and moving towards timber frame as a more sustainable material to reduce our carbon emissions through the construction of our new developments. But it doesn't end there. There's an ongoing supply chain engagement, and that looks at something called EPDs, environmental product declarations. And again, this is something that we're seeing more and more come about in terms of the products, materials being used and the environmental credentials of those materials to support not only in development, but also in terms of our procurement of materials and the sustainability credentials. And this is a continued cycle to improve our carbon credentials and also the monitoring thereof. So moving on, nutrient neutrality, which I don't tend to be an expert on by no stretch of the imagination. But this is a planning challenge, and this relates to phosphate and nitrate levels in water courses. And this is a challenge because it's significant delays through planning the assurances that are provided to make sure that we negate against new build and ensuring that we absolutely are able to mitigate those responsibilities before we get permission to build new homes. So it's all to do with water courses and its prevention of new development, planning permissions being granted, and how we can achieve that. So it is a challenge, and no doubt, it has serious implications for us in terms of delaying build, but there also can be costs associated with that. So there are, for example, things called carbon credits that can be purchased by third parties. So if we need to offset our carbon targets, then you can see as an example there on this slide that the cost per credit that has been worked up for a scheme in Shipfield, 4 flats in Norwich, we're looking at up to £8 to £10 per credit, which is scary, really, and that all has to be fed into the appraisals, and it costs obviously more money to develop and to reduce those costs. We do have more influence and control if we are developing our own schemes, our land-led schemes, as opposed to paying those costs to Section 106 agreements, whereby another developer is developing a scheme and we are purchasing those homes from that developer. Other initiatives such as the biodiversity net gain includes a net improvement by 10%, increasing land and taking monetary value, and again relates to cost of credits and mitigation benchmarking the quality of the existing site. So in summary, lots of works are needed to be done to ensure that our green credentials meet planning obligations. And then we've got another slide in terms of what has been delivered over the last 12 months. So carbon capture, 506 trees planted in the last year to help support and offset our carbon emissions. And a note said that land-led development versus Section 106 is, again, what I alluded to earlier in terms of having more control over our schemes and what we can deliver, as opposed to purchasing directly from developers and pay for that privilege. So in terms of new homes delivered across the last 12 years, we delivered 94 in total. This does not include 7 Gypsy and Travellers pitches at Swanton Road because they are not actually required to have an EPC rating because they're pitches rather than homes. And out of these homes, we had 26 which were A rated and 72 B rated homes, which is really good in terms of future proofing. Also, when we're trying to meet our net zero objective in 2050, these are homes that will need no further works because they are already meeting the standards of 2050 as today's targets. Okay, so moving on to our overall homes performance, which includes our existing homes. This slide is showing us a 3-year trajectory from March 2023 up to date. And you can see there the movement in terms of the homes that are rated as A and B increasing, which is great. A lot of that is from our new build homes. But I'm proud to say we also included in terms of our existing homes, we achieved the first 6 homes which achieved an A rating, which is also good. But you can also see we are fast approaching also in terms of our 2030 corporate target that we're reaching, but fast approaching below 500 homes below a D rating. And you can see the progress that we've made over the last 5 years. So, for example, in March 2025, we now have 491 D EPC rated homes and 17 EPC E rated homes. So to help to support us deliver this, we look at funding opportunities. So the government has something called Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. So the last round has just concluded, and that was for 2-year period from 2023 to 2025, in which housing associations and local authorities were encouraged to apply as consortiums. And being part of Independent East, you can see the logo on the bottom left of the screen, which includes Freebridge, Havebury, Orwell, and Saffron Housing. Broadland acted as the lead bid as part of that consortium and had successful award to deliver the programme on behalf of the consortium. Interestingly, and we were talking about terminology earlier on, the funding has moved from decarbonisation to warms homes. And I suggest that's a language change with a more focus on residents and the challenges of energy price increases. So the new round of bidding relates to the period 2025 to 2028. And because consortium bids, they were encouraged, but you also had individual entries also, which were allowed, that the consortium members decided that they wanted to go at it alone. Broadland did the same thing, and we therefore were successful in being awarded funded for the period 2025-2028 over the next 3 years. Obtaining these funds are very difficult. You're given a short period of time from the announcement to actually the closing, and the applications forms there's a lot of detail and a lot of work that goes into them. So we have to work with external partners and we work with frameworks. So previously we worked with Fusion 21, which allowed us to appoint E.ON to the Independent East bid. And we have now partnered up with Greener Futures Partnership, which are focused for housing associations, and Live Green, who are a bespoke specialist company of delivering retrofit works to homes. So you can see a split specifically for Broadland Housing in terms of how much money we received. It's interesting, as you can see, the funding contribution's gone down from 48% to 41%. And I wouldn't say disappointingly, but we didn't receive all of the funds that we wanted to bid for. But having said that, and the reason why I'm not that disappointed is because the funding arrangement was significantly oversubscribed. So what they tried to do to balance out all of the bids, because I think they were trying to appease many different organizations, is the majority of people were awarded a third of the funding that they applied for. So it just goes to show, the financial challenges that the government are having also in terms of what the sector is trying to achieve and deliver. So yeah, it pleases me to say that in terms of our Wave 2 bid, which has just concluded, that we overachieved in terms of the number of homes we delivered. So we set out to deliver 61 homes. We actually delivered 64, and all of our homes completed by the end of March, where with other consortium members within Independent East, their programs have overrun. They're still complete and hoping to finalise in May, but also they weren't able to deliver on the full commitments of their programs. Saffron were a significant part of the bid, so they probably had nearly half of all of the other consortium members because they had a strategic approach to take advantage as much as they could of that funding and reduce works in other areas, which is fair play in terms of the strategy, but in terms of delivery, that hasn't worked out as well as it could be in terms of not being able to use up all of the grant funding. And here we have 3 different photographs of typical installations of Bloomsbury Close solar panels and also air source heat pumps and solar panels at Pound Cottages. When I alluded to earlier that some of our homes achieved an A rating, they were homes that actually received air source heat pumps and solar PV panels combined. And it brings up challenges. So Bloomsbury Close, the photograph on the left, also we had the challenge of actually the roof tiles were asbestos roof tiles. So we had to work collaboratively with 3 different partners to focus on how we could safely install those panels, which delayed the program, caused its own challenges, but we were still successful in achieving that by the end of the financial year, which was a good news story. Next slide. So some of the additional challenges, I've touched on it before, but the installation measures continue to increase with inflation. We have the challenge that energy bills, unfortunately, still continue to rise. You may see, I've lost sight, to be honest with you. I used to monitor energy costs religiously, and I know that they did go down slightly just recently, but ultimately, I think year on year, energy costs sadly continue to increase. Regulations, laws, rules, compliance continue to change all of the time. So even when we apply for grant funding, it gets more difficult each time. There are more standards that needs to be achieved. The longer journey, there's a picture there of a hydrogen ready boiler, which we do fit as standard when we do fit new boilers. The infrastructure is not set up, but that potentially is a game changer for us. So we just need to be mindful in terms of value for money and not committing too far down the air source heat pump route. The air source heat pump route, you're talking on average between £13,000 and £15,000 for a new air source heat pump to retrofit, compared to a new boiler of £2,000. Interestingly, again, the government are pushing more funding for those that install air source heat pumps over the gas boilers, and also the challenge with skills and labour. So a big challenge for the sector again is when the government set out these funded programs, is that there is an absolute mad rush across the sector to get the resources to actually be able to deliver the program, because you have set timescales that you have to deliver these works on an annual basis. And there's been some interesting cases where we've seen, not us, not anybody in Independent East, but other landlords, larger landlords, national landlords across the country, there have been contractors picking and choosing who they would like to work for, which doesn't help the overall objectives, but just goes to show the size of the challenge. So interestingly, I was looking at an article not so long ago in regards to 2030 targets, and question went out to over 120 housing associations asking two questions really. One, how confident are you that your organisation will meet the EPC target by 2030? And you can't see those percentages because they're quite small. But the upshot was that only 48% said that they were very confident or confident of meeting that target. Quite a large percentage, 24% were neutral at this stage, but only 29% saying that they were confident or very confident of meeting that 2030 objective. And then there was a leading question that looked at what were the biggest obstacles to reaching your net zero targets. And interestingly, two of the biggest challenges related to lack of extra funding from the government, which is really interesting, bearing in mind what I just spoke about in regards to reducing the funding available, and also the prices of the new technologies. So this was just interesting feedback, a couple of points there across the sector in terms of some of the concerns. Moving on to more positive notes. So in terms of how we assess ourselves, we also use something called Sustainable Homes Index for Tomorrow, an acronym for SHIFT. So this is an external body that covers 21 different criteria. They are focused for sustainability standard for the housing sector, and we have an assessment done every between 2 and 3 years to assess our environmental credentials. And it goes through all things such as building new homes, existing home improvements, office and operations, supply chains, and so on. All the information is compiled, and it ends up with a rating. The rating goes from bronze, silver, gold to platinum, and platinum is the new highest standard, if you like. And the great thing about it is it's an independent assessment. It helps to understand where we are on our net zero journey, and it also helps to support residents and staff in reducing our carbon footprint. And I'm pleased to say that the last time we had our SHIFT assessment, we achieved a gold standard. And I think where we are, and this is just a general comment or observation for myself really, whether it comes to new build homes, how far we've moved on the journey from existing homes, or whether it's our accreditations for third-party assurances, we are in a really good place in terms of where we fare compared to other housing associations. So that's one of two key third-party accreditations. The other accreditation is something called Ritterwald, which is a European organisation. It's a more detailed assessment on environmental, social and governance criteria. But there are just one key additional benefit to this sustainable standard is the investment in the global financial markets. So what I mean by that is actually we could have lenders that are interested in this and that help us to be able to borrow money. So they can ask for this to look at this credential, look at how we perform on our ESG credentials, and depending on how we perform, helps to release and unlock funding from our lenders, which can only be a positive thing, and establish better rates from our lenders. So in terms of the criteria for this, again, there are 3 different marks that you can grade on the bottom right-hand corner. We have 1 tick against the advocate, 2 ticks against the ambassador, and 3 ticks against the front runner being the highest. So how we scored when we were last assessed in 2024 for environmental, And governance, we scored the Ambassador Award, and we were front runner in terms of sustainability, which again is all very positive. We also recognise, as well as making our homes run as efficiently as possible, that there's more that we need to do in terms of support to our residents and awareness to staff to make sure that we understand our responsibilities and to live as sustainable as possible. So there are various things that we do across the year. So not only talking to our residents and offering support and advice, when we're installing new technologies, there is a whole process that's linked into understanding how to use the technology, or even before that, it's about understanding why we want to install the new technology, the benefits it will bring, and then to post installation, it's about monitoring and hand holding of using the equipment and making sure we're getting the correct benefits from the renewable technologies that we install. So this would include things like air source heat pumps, which to be fair are not the most easiest heating systems to be able to operate, but it's kind of an aftercare sales service in terms of making sure that actually residents are getting the full benefits from those technologies that are being installed. And also this extends to non-renewable technologies and advice support when we're installing things like boilers, for example, hot water cylinders that can use up a lot of energy and actually be quite costly appliance within the home. But we also share resident energy saving advice. We have web page links to energy saving measures, and also coming out and speaking to residents at members events and other engagement events to helping to share the story. So moving on to operational activities now. So we've gone through new build homes, we've gone through existing homes, and these are some of the things that we're doing to help in terms of our operational activities. So in terms of scheduling is a big thing. So the less time we spend driving, more time, obviously, not only is the service efficient in terms, this could be repairs or other services, but also helps to reduce the travel time, traveling to and from, which increase traveling to and from homes. So we've introduced the 30-minute rule to try and minimize our mileage. Introduction of scheduling in local delivery areas. So this is more of a focus in trying to get local teams, the delivery of local services, maintaining that local delivery focus within specific areas, specific operational areas, again, with a focus on reducing our mileage and being more efficient in the services we deliver. Not only that, but it also helps in terms of the understanding and of the knowledge that staff have of those areas that they provide a service. First time fix has a key fundamental point of making sure that actually if it's fixed, let's hope that it stays fixed and avoid any repeat visits. So stay fixed. The more times that we have to go out to repair things, the less efficient the business. And again, the more impact it has on our carbon footprint, and also the utilization of multiple work streams, which relates to, again, how efficient we can work to carry out works. There may be multiple works that need to be done. How efficiently we carry that works out by using and mobilizing, for example, repairs operatives who can carry out the works more efficiently by working together. Waste reductions. So there is lots of waste that is managed, and we use our state services. We have our Colton stores where we're able to segregate out our waste and trying to reduce and recycle as much as possible. We're working on obtaining more data on this to improve service delivery and monitor our carbon footprint. and we do have recyclable. We do use our services for green waste, and it can help in terms of recycled biomass pallets. Again, an initiative that is set out to help also reduce our carbon footprint. So vehicles is an interesting subject, because I guess the question will be at some point in time is, when do we make the leap of faith to electrical vehicles? Which will come. When it will come, not so sure. But we already aim to release our vehicles, or our vans especially, on a 3-year cycle. Every time we do that, our vehicles are of more of efficient carbon emissions. The logistics of electrical vehicles is not that straightforward. So it's not as easy as just saying, okay, let's go, we're ready and we're geared up and we've got the infrastructure to move towards electrical vehicles. But that will be a catalyst when it comes in terms of, and a big impact in terms of reducing our carbon emissions when it actually does come. And there are also incentives for our essential car users in terms of salary sacrifice schemes for those that choose an electric vehicles. And materials, I mentioned earlier on, actually something that development team are doing in terms of the energy credentials of the materials that they purchase. And it's no different in terms of operationally. So when we look at the materials that we purchase, I mentioned earlier on the hydrogen ready boilers as an example, but various materials that we purchase, we are looking actually at the green credentials of those materials to minimize our impact on the environment. There's also an initiative that they'll remind me of, is they're looking to identify the best way forward to utilize the van stock as well. So to minimize the amount of different stock that we use, just to focus on the green credentials and most trusted stock that we use. Again, it also helps with the first time fixed. So it's using products that purchased offer more value for money in terms of tried and tested, and do the job over a longer period of time without the need to be replaced on a more frequent basis. And procurement. So when we procure out materials, whether we procure out contracts, whether we could procure out services to third parties, we focus on, listed on the slide there, we talk about the 5 E's. The 5 E's is, it's not just about value for money and focusing on the cheaper service. It's about efficiency, spending well, effectiveness, spending wisely, environmental, spending sustainably, equity, spending fairly, and economy, spending less. So all of those are all those 5 E's are the type of things that we focus on in terms of value for money and tendering and contract management. When we contract out services by going through tender processes, you can see an example of a questions there where we're looking for the green credentials from third-party suppliers also. And that also goes to help us in terms of our accreditations, in terms of our influence on other third parties in trying to deliver what we're ultimately trying to achieve. And there's currently a big push in terms of contract managers as well, when we're managing contracts and having regular meeting with these contractors, holding them to account and making sure we can monitor where we are in terms of what you said you were going to deliver. How are we performing against those key performance metrics? And then finally, our estate services team. So I'm not going to go through each of these points here, but they're just a few examples of some of the ways what our estate services team are helping out to support some of our carbon footprint initiatives, helping to reduce our carbon footprint. And again, these are all examples that help to support when we're being assessed by third-party assessors, our green credentials, and there are calculations and data and information that goes in to these initiatives and keeping and helping to support reducing our carbon footprint. So I've been talking now for 37 minutes at least, which I'm sure you're all aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to finish and just say the journey continues. So we're on this journey. I'm not so sure there will be an end to this journey. We have targets up to 2050, but I think it's likely to be an ever evolving journey, which I'm sure will change. But if I was to go back to the first slide, our environmental responsibilities across the business do play an important factor in making a difference. And I thank you for listening and welcome any questions.